March 1994, a fire engulfs a car on a country road in Scotland. Claire Morris, married less than a year, dies in the blaze.
The purpose of his meeting Claire was to groom her for the purpose of marrying her, gaining her estates and killing her.
Has this got a microphone on? Oh, earthquake!
Malcolm Webster is possibly the most subtle, clever, most heinous, evil person that is beyond most people's imaginations. The really scary thing about Malcolm Webster is that he appears to be completely normal.
Malcolm Webster got away with murder in Scotland. Claire Morris never suspected her charming husband was really a monster. And his murderous ways were far from over.
Is there any doubt in your mind that there would be people in Australia who were his victims?
If he has worked and lived in Australia, it would be highly likely.
English-born Claire Morris was raised in the country town of Oyen, in the heart of Australia's Murray.
She was a wonderful sister. She was the most happy, social, gregarious, full of life person that I've ever met.
You loved her to bits?
Absolutely, yes.
When the family moved back to England, Claire became a nurse, and in 1991 she met a fellow nurse, Malcolm Webster, the son of a high-ranking British policeman.
She was smitten, besotted with him. She was absolutely besotted with him.
It was a whirlwind romance. 2 years later, they married.
And before we go, we just have two presents here. One for my mother-in-law.
Malcolm Webster, the perfect husband.
Thank you for everything.
8 months after the wedding, a country drive ends in an inferno. Killing Claire, Webster playing the role of a grieving widow.
This looked, for all the world, like a desperately tragic accident. The initial inquiry had been on the basis of the information from Malcolm Webster that a motorcyclist had run him off the road. So considerable inquiries were made to find that motorcyclist, unsuccessfully. From a criminal point of view, that was the only crime on the table, and the inquiry was closed. So nothing further was done.
God bless you, Claire. Malcolm came down to the funeral in a wheelchair with a neck brace on. I remember holding his left hand, and I know I was certainly in floods of tears as they were lowering Claire's coffin into the grave. And I looked at him and so was he. And that persuaded me for 14 years that the accident was a genuine accident, because I had no perception whatsoever that anybody could fake that sort of emotion. That was something I couldn't believe.
Webster did very well out of Claire's death, didn't he?
Financially, he gained about 200,000 UK pounds.
There was a life insurance policy?
Yeah.
There was 20,000 sterling in the bank?
She'd saved up 20,000 from her nursing, yes.
What did he spend the money on?
From what I found out, he spent it on a yacht, an expensive car, and apparently lavish gifts for girlfriends that he acquired pretty quickly after Claire's death.
First impressions?
Quite charming and quite amusing. We were sitting next to each other at a dinner party and he was quite good company.
So you fell in love?
Eventually, yes.
Like Webster's first wife, Felicity Drum was also a nurse. Early on in the relationship, unusual things started to happen.
We'd been out for the day at a local seaside town, brought provisions for meals for a couple of nights, came back and I'd made dinner and put other things away in the fridge, and literally when I woke up at what I thought was the next morning, Instead, it became apparent over time that in fact it was 36 hours later and I'd slept right through the preceding day.
Did it ever cross your mind you'd been drugged?
No, not at all.
How would he have drugged you if you'd been the one that had prepared the food?
It was Malcolm's habit always to make me a cup of tea after meals.
Felicity had no idea she was being drugged or that Webster was grooming her to be his next victim.
Did you know anything about the life insurance policies that he'd taken out in your name?
No, I knew of 2 life insurance policies which were ones that we had discussed, but I wasn't aware of all the others. I think there were a total of 9.
9 life insurance policies? For a total of how much money?
I think at the current exchange of the time, I was worth $1.9 million dead.
They were married in New Zealand in 1997. A year later, a baby boy. The whole time, Webster was plotting the perfect murder. And yet again, it was to happen on a quiet drive in the country.
He was very insistent that we go somewhere remote. He wanted to be somewhere that was isolated, that there was no one else that was going to be there. He wanted solitude, he said.
Before they left, Webster secretly planted a jerry can of petrol in the boot. He also spiked Felicity's drinking water with sleeping pills.
He had bought me a bottle of water and had taken the cap off by the time he'd come out of the store and handed it to me and said, you know, you're feeding, you need to keep your fluids up. He directed me to the forest, and I do recall turning off onto a road that was leading into the forest. But my next memory is of waking to the sound of the mobile phone ringing. I wake finding myself lying sort of recumbent back in the passenger seat, which had been put back.
Hi.
I answer the phone and it's my father, who sounded slightly anxious and a bit agitated, but very clear with me that we were to stop whatever we were doing and we were to return straight away to my aunt's home.
I told her, look, I've got something serious to talk to you about as far as your money is concerned.
Yeah, Malcolm's got the baby, yeah.
I said, can you come home as soon as possible?
Her dad's frantic phone call had just saved Felicity's life. Incredibly, he was calling to warn her that Webster had cleaned out her bank accounts. But Felicity was drugged, semi-conscious, and still in danger.
Malcolm!
He had our child in the pushchair and was moving a distance away from the car. He got really angry with me because, I opened the car door and called out to him, and he was very agitated that I was awake and was insisting that I get back in the car and go back to sleep.
What do you think Webster was plotting?
My demise.
Talk me through it. What was he planning to do?
I think that I was going to meet the same end that his first wife Claire had, and that he was going to come up with some rationale as to how the car may have caught fire because a container of petrol was found in the boot.
Webster's evil plot was unravelling. He drove Felicity home and then he fled.
As soon as I saw all the life insurance policies at my parents' home when Dad showed them to me, I knew instantly then that he had murdered Claire.
New Zealand police did not have enough evidence to charge Webster, who was now planning an escape to Australia. But just before he left, Felicity tracked him down.
I said to him, how could you have even conceived of doing what quite clearly you were? And he said a comment in the vein of, oh, for God's sake, Felicity, you would have died happy. I was absolutely gutted. I couldn't imagine how anyone could do this to somebody else who had done nothing but ever love and care for them. And, you know, I had a child with this man.
For 17 years, Malcolm Webster was able to weave a wicked web of lies to conceal the horrible truth of just how he murdered his wife Claire right here. What finally brought him undone was just one thing: his greed. Now, in Scotland, in the seaside town of Oban, Webster was back to his devious ways.
He was so caring, so attentive. He would open the car door for me, make sure that perhaps dinner was ready when I came home from work. You couldn't have wished for a better person.
Like Webster's other wives, Simone Banerjee is a nurse, and she too was quickly smitten by his charms.
A real charmer would sum him up very well, but seemed an honest kind of guy as well.
Weeks into their love affair, Webster shaved his head, telling Simone he had leukemia. It was a lie. After he told you that he had cancer, did it affect your relationship, your willingness to commit to him?
I'm afraid me being my moral compass wouldn't let me run out on somebody that was suffering such an illness.
Love-struck, Simone fast-tracked their romance, allowing Webster to move in. She was the sole recipient of a wealthy family estate.
Did you sign a will leaving him your estate?
Yes, I did.
Why did you do that?
Because this was the man I loved and I was going to be with him for the rest of my days.
Really good, actually, I must say.
Together, they planned a honeymoon voyage on Simone's yacht.
Stunning day.
Much later, she would learn that Webster had a sinister motive for going to sea.
I found out this year when I checked my life jacket that my cylinder was punctured. The foil on my cylinder was punctured, and I hadn't checked my life jacket since I'd sailed with him. Everybody else's life jackets were fine. So I pretty much no doubt that the boat was the way it was going to go.
It sends a shiver up my spine.
Well,
I'm
it
sure
sent
it
a
does
shiver up
yours.
mine when I found it too.
At the time, Simone was blinded by love, but a letter changed everything.
The letter stated that my life would be considered as being in danger should I continue in my relationship with Mr. Webster.
Now, what was your reaction?
That's complete nonsense. Can't be the same person.
The letter was from panicked police. They were secretly watching Malcolm after learning of the attempted murder of his second wife, Felicity. They warned Simone in the nick of time. What happened when you confronted Webster with what police had told you?
Well, when he said, who told you? Then I said the police. And that's when he changed, his face went white. His facial expression changed. And it was a very, very scary place to be sitting in the kitchen at that point.
At last, police were closing in. DNA tests on the remains of Webster's first wife, Claire, showed she had indeed been drugged. The crash, a setup.
The evidence that we heard in court, this is a man who couldn't stop himself. And his behaviours on the evidence we heard in court were repeated and repeated and repeated.
Derek Ogg is the prosecutor who finally brought Webster to justice. Do you think he thought he'd get away with it?
I don't know. I have no idea what goes on in that man's mind. I have not, after 30 years in criminal law, I've never met anyone like him.
It was the longest trial in Scottish history, but a jury took just 2 hours to convict Webster of the murder of Claire and the attempted murder of Felicity. He was sentenced in July to 30 years in prison. But investigations are far from over. But Scottish police now tell us they're aware of several mystery years where Webster lived here in Australia, and that it's likely he had Australian victims. They're now appealing for anyone who knows anything about his time here to come forward.
There's no rational basis for thinking that Mr. Webster for some reason, completely changed his personality during his visits to Australia.
A leopard never changes his spots.
This leopard, I think, was incapable of it.
Perversely, Webster's most likely victims are nurses. He targeted those who selflessly help others.
These were all incredibly competent, capable women. They were all caregivers. And they'd all reached a kind of certain age in their life, I guess, where they might have wondered, when am I going to get a life? And along comes Malcolm Webster, charming, generous, kind. He says, put your feet up, let me do that. He says, let me make you dinner. He says, let me give you a massage. Take this present. And suddenly the caregiver is being cared for. And people said to me, how could it be that all these sensible women all fell for this man? For someone to offer to care for you is incredibly, in my judgment, an incredibly seductive thing to do. And who doesn't want looked after?